Nathan Vella, you may know him. If that name sounds familiar, it's because you and your team created a couple of recent fantastic games, one of which we've been playing for a while. That's Super Time Force.
Super Time Force.
And you were working on Below.
Indeed.
Which is
still working on Below.
Xbox One
I'll just
and
get that out of the
PC.
way right off the bat.
Yeah, well, so I guess let's just start there. Let's get the elephant out of the room. Below's a game that I think I've been seeing since before the console came out.
Yeah.
Or pretty close to it. So where are we? How close are we to Below? And for viewers/listeners that aren't familiar with it, give me the Cliff's Notes.
Sure.
Give me the elevator pitch version of Below as well.
So Below is an adventure meets roguelike meets exploration game. It's a game that is really just about exploring, surviving, and eventually discovering. It's a game.
Sold.
It's a game where we don't tell you anything.
Yeah.
You arrive at an island. You play a character that we just call the Wanderer, but there's no real text or dialogue or pop-ups or story words or anything. You just kind of figure it out for yourself. So the Wanderer arrives at the island, and you're left to explore with the kind of, known purpose of going below. Eventually you find your way into the caves or the depths, as we call them.
Yeah.
And your entire goal is to survive. And if you manage to survive and you manage to explore with some purpose rather than just run around aimlessly, that's when you can kind of start putting the actual background of the story, the pieces of the lore, the reasons for your being there, the goals of the game together through that kind of discovery process. So, I mean, it's sword and shield combat. We're not, it's not anything crazy on that front, and we're not trying to throw you off the deep end. It is a game about sword and shield combat. It is a game about lots and lots of death. You will die a lot, but when you die, you don't just play the same life over and over and over again. You're actually playing a sequence of lives. So one character that dies is always dead, and you arrive at the island as a new character with what has happened with the last character kind of persisting. So the idea behind it is to create a game that takes place predominantly in a single screen. So much of the dungeon is actually just a single screen level, where the camera's really far zoomed back. You're a tiny character in this kind of massive, expansive, and ever-changing world. And we really want players to craft their own kind of experience, their own narrative, their own reasons for being there. Some people are going to be there to kill stuff and collect things, but other people might explore more intensely and might use the tools that they have to try to find some secrets, and through that process might actually be able to piece together a story, and then maybe that story will be the story that we meant it to be, and maybe it'll be something totally different that's way cooler than what we even thought it was going to be.
Now, Super Time Force was super badass for many reasons, one of which was it had a real quirky, just fun sense of humor to it that was only enhanced by its really fun sort of 16-bit style graphics. Below is kind of similarly, not quite as maybe bubblegum type visual style, but kind of the little bit of an old school look to it.
Yeah, I mean it's a game that we're really, everything that we make at the studio, we try to put aesthetics forward. It's trying to be audio and visually interesting, It's trying to be art directed. It's trying to have an aesthetic, and that aesthetic, in the case of Super Time Force, was us trying to do our own take, our own kind of style on something that was inspired by old school stuff, but brought into our own kind of new school way. Below, on the other hand, is us trying to think about camera and perspective, and a huge part of that game, almost the entire goal of the game, is to create an atmosphere, is to create a tone, and the art is entirely at the forefront of that. I don't know even how to explain it, because it sounds, of course I'm going to say this, but it doesn't look like anything else out there. It's a very different styled game, and the art direction is something that we've spent a huge amount of time on. And part of the reason why it's taken us a while to make is because figuring out that art style with a tiny little character in this large world, to figure out how to set that tone, to make it feel foreboding and huge and intense while also being inviting and curious and almost poking players into wanting to see what's around every little corner. It's been a huge challenge, and I think that's what we love to do. We love to make all, like, Super Time Force and Below are in a lot of ways the furthest apart you could possibly make.
Oh yeah,
in
I can
terms
see
of
that.
One is Super Time Force is a very traditional video game with a very singular hook. And a very clear style. And then Below is a game kind of about bigger things, about ideas and aesthetics and atmosphere. We make a lot of really weird different stuff, and that's why I think we like to make the stuff that we make, because it's never the same shit twice.
And that's what makes, but for me, that's what makes digital games interesting over the last generation and into this one, is because that's where all the risk-taking, the creative risk-taking occurs. I'm not saying it's non-existent in AAA stuff, but
they're more cautious.
You publishers are
it's basically non-existent.
Yeah,
it's close. I mean, publishers are hesitant to commit tens of millions of dollars to something that takes a creative risk, whereas you were telling me earlier your team is you got about 24 people at your studio. You can sort of walk out on that ledge a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's over. We just had our 10-year anniversary as a studio, which is pretty
That's awesome.
crazy. Yeah,
Congrats.
I'm very proud of that fact, and I bring it up at every possible opportunity. And sometimes we'll brag for 1 to 2 hours about it. But I think
people like long podcasts. So,
yeah, so there you go. I could actually fill an entire podcast of just bragging about how awesome I think we are. No, it's the thing.
Episode 218.
Nathan's still bragging.
Yes, we're going.
One of the things that I think is amazing about games in general now is that kind of, I think that the cross-pollination between the kind of like more heady idea-based independent games and the kind of like how do we get as many players playing something cool as possible AAA stuff. I think there is a lot of people drawing ideas from both. I think you're seeing a lot of independent developers really trying to find out what pieces of AAA kind of like creativity will work in their game, because they do want to try to find a way to break through to reach a bigger market, to reach players that aren't necessarily just the indie game players. And then on the flip side, I think a lot of bigger studios are really inspired by the games that are coming out from independent developers or smaller teams. I mean, you look, the example I always use is how effectively Ubisoft has created this kind of like weird culture of every once in a while you get a Child of Light.
Yep.
You get a Blood Dragon. I mean, all the way back to From Dust and
true.
Scott Pilgrim. I mean, those are many, those are 5-6 years ago, created by 40-person teams or so. It's amazing to see that kind of happen. And every time I talk to anybody from any of the major publishers, that's something that they're all kind of thinking about. And then you talk to anybody who's developing, from the biggest franchises down to new franchises. People are always looking both ways. I mean, we definitely look at, we understand that the market for small downloadable games is pretty tiny. It's a relatively small number of people, and we have to, I think, as developers, acknowledge the fact that we're not making games for everyone. But if we acknowledge that, it means we can actually start thinking about what will make our game more interesting, and we can do stuff like, Mike Bithell going out and getting Andy Serkis to voice a character. Just because that is something that is interesting, and AAA does very well. So why can't Mike do it?
You're hitting on something that actually I harp on a lot, and I would love your perspective on it. For me, I think I've long lamented on this show the death of Summer of Arcade. That was a program that Microsoft used for many years that really put a lot of digital titles on the map. It was at this time when not a lot of AAA things were shipping, and it was really. Developers would fight to be a part of it.
Oh, hell yeah.
It
was a brawl.
It's gone now, and is discoverability the biggest challenge that you as a small studio with a digital title face on both Xbox and I suppose probably on PlayStation as well, and even on Steam, I suppose, where there's a million different things.
Yeah, I would say after you get out of the make a good game problem, which is the hardest problem, discoverability is the second, third, fourth through 12th hardest things to do.
There's a lot of noise out there nowadays.
Yeah.
But there's and to be totally honest, a lot of that noise is really damn good.
Yeah.
There is a higher amount of good, worth your time games than ever.
Absolutely.
For sure. And that's an awesome thing for fans. I think that's part of the reason we've seen the kind of this console generation happen so quickly, plus Steam's rise just become so insane so fast is because there's just so much more content from big studios all the way down to small studios. But I do think, Summer of Arcade is kind of like the reason why everybody started making console games digitally, right? We all wanted to be that game.
Yeah,
that
the Braid, the Limbo.
We wanted that opportunity. And even if you didn't get it, you still fought to make something good enough to get in there. And so quality bar goes up. I think on all of the digital platforms, I think especially console, because their storefronts are so poor compared to Steam. I think it's a much bigger challenge. There is no kind of like singular promotions or series of really high quality promotions. Both Microsoft and Sony do good promotions, but they're not events. They're not kind of moments in the kind of year of gaming that we all press pause
right.
and wait and kind of expect. And
Steam Summer Sale.
Yeah, but Steam Summer Sale
Steam
Summer Sale is us waiting to get good games at a discount. It's not waiting for us to be delivered a set of 4 or 5 special kind of unique. And I do think that while I totally understand why Summer Arcade kind of fell off in terms of popularity, and while I do understand why it's no longer a thing, I do think that we're at a point in console, both PS4 and Xbox One, where I would love to see the platforms putting more focus on how to get the great games that need that extra little bump that could be defining for their platforms, that extra limelight.
I think Devolver Digital does a really good job of finding a lot of those guys that are kind of like on the edge, and then helping them get the resources that they need to tip it over.
Oh, absolutely. And Devolver has a style, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have that if you are into their games, that you are going to continue to get games that you're into, because they have like a stable of games that are all kind of, they're very different, but they all fit into this same kind of motif or
in fact, we're covering, so you're here, we're going to be doing some big exclusive fun stuff with Below next week on IGN, all month long. As part of IGN First, we've been taking a look at a different awesome digital game each week, and usually running out like 3 cool features for the week. You're going to close us out for October.
I'm very excited
with some brand new Below stuff for next week, which I'm really excited about.
There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that, people, unless you've gone to PAX and sat down and played, you probably haven't seen more than clips of the game in years. And so this is going to be a great chance for us to show more than clips, and a good chance for us to actually really dive into some of the things that we think make the game cool and interesting and challengingly fun.
So to go back to real quick to the discoverability thing, because this topic I think is fascinating, and I think a lot of gamers just don't think about it. They think they see the game, they're like, oh yeah, I know that, it's cool, I totally want it. They don't think about, well, what are all the things I'm not seeing on my console or on IGN or whatever it is. How do you go about, because you've chosen to publish the game on console with Microsoft on Xbox One, and you have a PC version as well.
We're self-publishing the Microsoft or the Xbox One version.
But
it's definitely there is definitely a strong partnership with Microsoft, despite the fact that it's through ID at Xbox. Right. They've been. There was a point in time where the game was under Microsoft Studios, and then when ID at Xbox was created, Microsoft was really awesome about it, because I went and talked to them and said, hey, this is a thing that is exactly what we do. Because even when we were working with Microsoft, we were still funding the project ourselves. That was very important for us to have that kind of layer of control. Not that they will remove control from you, but just knowing that it's kind of, our sword that we're going to die on, or live on, hopefully. But they were very cool about us becoming an ID at Xbox game, about us moving from being published to self-publishing, and that, all the way up to Phil Spencer. The fact that they supported us kind of making a change that they didn't even have to support if they didn't want to. It showed me a lot about their drive to make sure that we did the game the way that we wanted to do it, rather than the way that they thought best fit their portfolio or something. And that, to me, that's that we get people get mixed up quite often because we've been very close with Microsoft about it. But the reason why I think it's so interesting is because they explicitly removed any obligation from us to be close with them. They said, you're now self-publishing it. but they gave us so many reasons and have supported the game so much that it's like, well, yeah, of course we're going to show it with Microsoft all the time as much as we can. Of course, we're going to do our best to, like, backs are being scratched in the best possible way. And then, there is a lot of, it's very rare that you get a chance to be like, no, this is actually, like, they actually deserve props for this.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be 10 million comments on the internet that are paid shill and all that kind of stuff, and that's totally cool. I understand that, but they do deserve a lot of props for that, because the game being self-published gives us a lot of the freedom to, for example, take longer than we thought.
Right.
Without having that pressure, worry that we're going to get forced to release something when we don't want to.
Yeah.
So the question I was going to ask actually still applies even to everything you just said. So with the discoverability thing, then you are self-publishing through the ID at Xbox program.
Yep.
Do you just have to start making friends with the right people over there so that when the game does come out, that maybe you'll get that dashboard promotion? Or is it like a total crapshoot where you're going to put the game out and then hope that they're going to see fit to help give it a push on their end?
It's a very long, hard, intense, involved process to make sure that as many people as possible inside any console, be it Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo or Ouya or anyone, understands that your game is cool, knows why, and can actually believe in the fact. Like, you have to be able to sell the game internally just as hard as you have to sell the game externally. Fortunately, when you're selling it internally, in our case, when we want to bring it to Microsoft and show it and say, like, okay, let's, give us some space at E3, or it's a much easier thing because they've seen the game grow. They've been a part of the development, whether it's directly or indirectly. And they also they can really sniff out something that's worthwhile for them. So the example that I always use is like watching the kind of like skyrocket that is Cuphead.
Yeah.
And,
That's so good.
And it's I love those guys. They're
fellow Canadians.
Yep. One in Saskatchewan, which is hilarious, and one just outside of Toronto, which is amazing. I've only ever seen them at conferences, even though we live so close.
Chad and Jared.
Yep.
Good guys.
Yep. They're I always try to burn them a little bit on not being friendly to me in Toronto. We're only friends at conference. No, I love those guys. And I love that game is an amazing example of, like, they gave everybody reasons to care about it, and they continue to give everyone reasons to care about it. And that is how you at least kind of like, start moving forward in terms of getting people to, whether it's internally at a console or externally at, say, IGN, care about something, is you need to be able to explain to people why it's cool. People need to believe that it's cool. And to me, the worst thing that anybody does is not speak honestly about their projects, is selling their projects instead of actually just selling why it's cool. It's very easy to get in a situation where you don't actually think that the game is rad, because there are huge points during development when your game is just not rad.
It's not ready yet, right?
Yeah. So I think that being able to, like, show and speak honestly about why the game is cool and have people, like, believe it, that's the first, like, that's the big step towards getting any kind of feature placement. And then it's just like this massive process of not having a crappy release date when there's 10 other things that could also get featured at the same time, and that's working directly with consoles to figure out what the best window is. And that's a hard, long process. There's about a million things that have to be done, and it's any developer that is putting a game out without doing that work is at a severe disadvantage, nowadays especially.
So last week we were doing a story on the show about, guys, who was it that had their retail release of their digital game canceled?
Oh, Shovel Knight.
Thank you, Shovel Knight.
Yeah, they had the Xbox version.
So they were they were going into retail with it, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out, where the Xbox One version couldn't get a retail release. Is that something like with that you look at for your games at some point, maybe down the road after it's out? Does the retail market, is it important for even the kinds of games that you make, the more smaller, more unique digital experiences?
Well, I think it makes a ton of sense if the game does really well. In the case of Shovel Knight, it makes perfect sense because it had already sold 500,000 copies or something crazy like that. That then it becomes an amazing way for hardcore fans to express additional love. It becomes like a collector's piece for for somebody who really like, I really doubt that more than a quarter of all of the retail sales will be new players. I think a lot of it, I mean, I've already super interested. Like I played from start to finish in one sitting on my Vita, and I would like to own it.
Yeah.
In a cartridge. I own Retro City Rampage, the PS4 disc.
That's interesting.
Like
so you suspect that it's largely a lot of double dips.
I think it's well, I mean, I look at it from my perspective,
Yeah.
and I think I'm a pretty good example, and I kind of use myself as an example quite often because I'm a middle-aged video game lover with a disposable income who really gets passionate about things that I like.
Yeah.
And I feel like I buy art books, I buy soundtracks on vinyl. I like to have these pieces that are usually beautifully done that I can put in my house, that I can see in front of me. And I think I love the retail side of independent games. I love that it's a thing that can happen now outside. I mean, it used to just happen in Germany and in Eastern Europe and really like smaller markets where there was very niche publishers. But
Right.
now that there are no longer kind of, huge obligations to print gajillions of copies off the bat, now we can actually see there's smaller digital turned retail publishers popping up. And that's a really interesting thing for me. I would love, like, just absolutely adore to do a real kind of collector's edition retail version of Below when it's finished. I think that's definitely something that, like, even just for us as creators, if I would love to give that to fans. I would love to have a chance to be like, hey, you probably already own the game, but here's why it's special.
Yeah.
Here's even just the box. I mean, the Shovel Knight box art's rad.
That's
like
true.
It's even, just having cool printed box art to me is interesting. So
There's something to be said about experiencing games the way we all did when we were kids, where sometimes you weren't even aware of games, but then you just spotted it on your friend's shelf, and you're like, "What's
or you
that?"
see the box art and it's interesting.
Yeah,
You're
or like
"What's
you look
this?"
at the
and you pick it up.
picture and you look at it, you see it on the back of a magazine or in a Nintendo Power, and obviously times have changed. Kids discover games through YouTube and on the internet in ways that we never did when we were younger, but the idea of stumbling upon something that's really cool that you had no idea about exists because of things like the retail experience where you're not looking for it, but you accidentally find it. And I think that is very important just to game culture.
When I see Mass Effect on the store shelves, I still go to buy it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I have this. Like, what am I doing? Oh, hell yeah. I just love that artwork.
I think the fact that we're in a time period in video games where we can be like, hey, that Shovel Knight game is getting a retail release on like a bunch of different platforms, and then be bummed that it's missing one. Like, it's getting a retail release.
Yeah.
Like we made, back when we made Clash of Heroes on Nintendo DS, like we went to the store and we bought all of the copies of the game that we made off the shelves. And it was one of the most, like, it sounds so friggin' lame, but I was honestly just like, holy shit. Like, this is, like, I felt like I had done actually something with my life.
I can understand that.
And I'm not knocking, I mean, everything else we've ever done in 10 years was digitally released. But being able to, like, feel a box of the thing that you built, I had friggin' tears in my eyes. I was just like,
I
was
understand.
A baby.
I mean, on a much lesser scale, I worked at a print magazine for 10 years before this, and I would go to an airport we were in vacation in Hawaii one time, and there was the magazine with my picture in it, and it's like, there is. I saw on a way lower level. I can totally sympathize with that.
I don't think it's lower.
It means
I think
something.
It's just,
Like, we have a guy out there, this guy Aransky, spent 5 years making a movie. It got distribution, and he took a picture at Walmart of it sitting on the shelf because it's there.
Yeah.
It's like a product.
Yeah.
Like, I guess the amount of effort and the artistry that goes into making something digital versus something physical, that's no different, right? They're just different mediums, but being who we are and growing up with the idea, like, having things in our hands, like, there's something going on there that's more than sentimental.
And the fact that it's possible now, I think, is an amazing. It's actually like a much bigger deal than we really make it. Like, the fact that it is a possibility for anyone, that if you make something that actually justifies having one, you can actually do it without requiring just an enormous investment in a warehouse space and worrying about like shelf space on like competing for shelf space at Walmart used to be like the biggest challenge in the entire, and now it's just like, no, just sell it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Like, it's no knocking the act of going to physically buy something, but if it shows up at my door or I walk into a store, it's not that much different. I just like to have it. And I really hope at some point that another one of our games outside of Clash of Heroes will end up in a retail release. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, all of that stuff.
And if you're one of the listeners who doesn't collect physical things of things you like, I would say give it a shot. Don't collect everything. That's very expensive and potentially too
Collect a
time-consuming.
thing.
Yeah. But like I collect DVDs like Blu-rays because I love movies and I like to have the physical format. And like 20 years from now, I don't want to be stuck without a machine or a format that I can't play anymore.
Plus, like, the Criterion boxes are just like
they
look so good. I
Yeah.
just want to put them up on my wall instead of art.
And Criterion specifically does like great masters of movies,
yeah.
and like you said, beautiful art, all sorts of features. None of this like split up features depending on who you buy it from. Don't settle for that.
Below, we'll be covering it. If you're intrigued by this conversation with Nathan, and I hope you are, tune in next week, all week to IGN. I think it's gonna be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. A new feature each day. Brand new footage of the game, the updated version. Nobody's seen it in a while, really.
It's so updated that it's being built right now. It is actually, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just like the build from PAX. So it's being built by the guys at the studio as we record this podcast to make sure it has all of the latest weirdness and funness.
Piping hot, fresh build of Below.
That's
coming to IGN next week.
Don't do that. That's not recommended, but that's how we roll.